Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Leadership for the Now show. My name is Florin Lungu, and I'm so delighted to be with you today. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague from the John Maxwell team, or how we call today Maxwell Leadership, Madalina Ghinescu. Hi, Madalina.
Hello, Florin. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you again.
Pleasure is mine. And as you can see, I have my blue yellow costume today. I didn't have a shirt, but I just took a polo shirt because I thought, there's a message there, so I can, stand with Ukraine as well.
Yeah, congratulations for that. And I think our discussion today would be related to crisis, right? Difficult times.
Absolutely. So this is again one of those episodes where we're gonna look at what can we do as leaders in difficult times. And usually this slot was actually reserved to interviewing guests, right? And you've been a guest on my show, and we're gonna resume that next week, right? So next week we're gonna have a guest show. We're gonna still talk about difficult times, and we're gonna leading in difficult times on our Mondays episodes with Madalena and I. But today let's look at some things, right, that leaders could do. Did we have some questions, or what do you have for me today, Madalena?
Yes, I have one question that it's very related to difficult times. Because when we go through a difficult time or a crisis, we might get very easily distracted because of the urgency, because of the cause of that crisis, and we might lose focus on the important things. So, my question for you, Florin, would be how can a leader or how can you advise a leader to keep on his mind, on their mind, the most important things during a crisis, and they not for them not to lose track, not to lose the vision, and of course to make sure that everything happens according to plan.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great question, because it's very easy for us as leaders or non-leaders to just get distracted and get emotional about the situation, right? So this happened to me as well. In the first days of this, it was there's that shock, and I didn't really know what to do and what my reaction would be. But as a leader, we are actually the role model for our team, and we're going to talk about that more in our next episode. But today, just think about that. you know in times of crisis, what is one of the characteristics of a crisis? Now, condition change very quickly, right? So what was our plan? Because you mentioned, how can we stick to, what was the plan? Well, we might had a plan before the crisis, but now in the crisis, or in changing times, in challenging times, well, our plan needs to evolve, if not, if not hourly, at least daily. We cannot just have a plan and wait and hope that conditions in the plan will stay the same, because the definition of a plan is that we have stable, intake conditions, right? And in the
Yes.
crisis, we know that actually this change very often, and it's so important. The question is spot on, because as a leader, the question that we should ask ourselves is, it what is the greatest return on my time investment? Like in times of crisis, you know resources are scarce, and how can I use my time and my influence to really make the best out of this situation for my team and for my company? And I see leaders do something that, I can appreciate what they're doing, but I see that might not help their team in the best way. What I mean by that is that I see leaders that step down their roles of leader of organization and go out, in person, and lead, humanitarian actions. In other words, they're out on the field, right? And they're trying to help the situation. And that's wonderful. But the challenge is that, you leave your team. It's like kind of the commander of a ship, leaves the ship and go help someone in need. Now, in that situation, the commander of the ship actually has to keep the ship on track and has to keep the ship floating and going. And someone on the team might be able to help. So, as a leader, it's very easy for us to just jump and do some things that we usually do not do just because it's a crisis situation. And that's great. But also, we want to keep the perspective. So, as a leader, if we just keep this metaphor as, in navigation, right? And we know one of the 21 laws of leadership, right, from John Maxwell's, 21 leadership laws of leadership, is the law of navigation, right? And that law says that anyone can steer a ship, but takes a leader to trace the course, right? To chart the course of action. So what happens is that in times like this, leaders that are great navigators, they can navigate through these, changing times. And the way they keep priorities top of mind is that they always look at, where do I want to go? What's the goal? And what can I do with this changing situation? Like, if we're not keeping the eye on the big picture, we're gonna lose track. It's like, being at sea with a ship, and we have a changing wind, right? If we don't adjust our sail, what's gonna happen is like we're just gonna be carried out by the wind. And so, as leaders, what we do is like we draw the trip ahead, and we also look at some past experiences. When did we had a crisis like this, and how did we navigate that? And we continuously, we continuously monitor conditions. And so all these things help us to keep the main thing the main thing, because as leaders, in challenging times, our priorities would change. So if our priority before this crisis, or before the situation, was maybe to, to create profit for our company, now the priority might be for us to just, save the company, or make it safe for our people. And so priorities change all the time. So as leaders, it's very, very important for us to keep priorities top of mind, and continuously, adjust those priorities and update those priorities based on the circumstances that we're facing today.
Mhm. Because you mentioned the law of navigation from Maxwell, I actually remember one of the most shocking examples that I've learned from that book, related to conquering South Pole. With two teams, yeah, they wanted to. They had a competition between them to conquer the South Pole, and one of the teams, let's say the losing team, decided in the last minute to take one another person with them on the journey, even though they set the food for four people instead of five. I don't remember exactly the number. So they didn't plan the whole trip or the whole expedition for five people. They planned for four people, and because of that, that is actually one cause that made the team lose their lives, because at the end of the at the end of the expedition, the whole team didn't survive, let's say like that. So it's a big point when you stop, when you think about, and when you talk about, okay, we need to plan ahead, we need to identify all the bad things that can happen to a team, that can happen to our company, and we as a leader are very responsible for that, and we need to pay attention to changing anything or any parameter in this whole equation, in this whole plan. But that doesn't mean, just like we said in the previous episode, that doesn't mean that we cannot be flexible, but it means for you to as for you, the leader, to take into consideration what changes if I change this parameter. Will it get me to the right target, or will it make me lose the target for good? And I want to go to the next question based on this, because now we are in time of crisis. The conflict is still going on between the two countries, Ukraine and Russia. What leaders should know from this conflict? What should they learn from this conflict? What do you think, Florin?
Yeah, so there are many things that we already learned from the conflict. Like, you see all on social media and all channels, you see these, side by side pictures of the leaders of the two countries, and one of them is said this is the boss, and the other one is the leader, right? So we see those things already, where in people's mind, someone which is close to their team, someone which is there on the ground, someone which is an example. We talk about this in the next episode, how leaders should be the catalyst, right? You cannot just point and say, hey, let's go in that direction, or actually instead of saying let's go, you say go in that direction, right? So a leader, what the leader does is the leader is out there in the front. So that's the first kind of lesson that we already see people kind of notice to the two types of leadership. But one of the biggest challenges we have as leaders in times like this is that if you are an action driven leader, your first thought in challenging times, in times of crisis, is not to just, okay, let's just stop for a moment and think about this and reflect on the situation. No, not at all. As a driven leader, your action, your reaction would be, well, let's do something about it. I cannot just wait and see, right? And so
Yeah,
this is a little bit
exactly.
contrary.
It's like, yeah, I need to take the action. I cannot sit for a second to wait something. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I need to do it right away.
Absolutely. And so what happens is that that's not the first thing that comes to our mind, to just take a step back and reflect on the situation. But yet, it's essential for us to be able to learn from the situation. John Maxwell says that, experience is not the best teacher, but evaluated experience is. And so when we look at the situation, or even when we look at the past, because one of the things that navigators do very, very well is that they learn from past experience. And I just recently, watch a video from Simon Sinek where he was talking about the Vietnam war that the US had, and they fought there for about 10 years. And it was a very similar situation with Russia and Ukraine. And he said, like, how come that we almost decimated the enemy, but we still lost the fight, right? How comes that? And it's almost, if we look back at that situation, it could be a very possible scenario for the current situation where Putin, might win the war, but actually lose the battle. Just, might win this battle, but lose the war, just because he would lose the support of people at home. And this is what happens with the United States, right? So they won the war, there in Vietnam. But what happens is that people at home voted to stop the war. So that's a very valuable lesson for us if we just step back a little bit and look at the situation. First of all, like, what am I seeing? If we only take 10 minutes out of our day to reflect upon our day, say, what did I do today? What did I experience today? Who did I speak with? Who did I met? Who was in meeting with? What did I heard? All of these things, help me kind of draw out, like, what did I learn, right? What did I learn today? And now, since I learned something from today, where can I apply this tomorrow? Because the challenge is, like, when we are in the action, we're not stopping to look at how we're doing. And this is very natural for all of us. And that's why one of the things that, I advise leaders to do right now, just take the time at the end of the day, because, in the last few days, I felt like I didn't have enough sleep. I was up, until late, and I had, meetings and seminars, and I'm attending a virtual event that is happening in the United States. So all these things kind of messed up my schedule, and I didn't have any time for me to reflect. And this was one of my kind of daily practice. Every evening, I take the time and I have my notebook and I sit down and kind of, write down my thoughts, and I'm going through, through my day and reflecting on that. And I can tell you, I'm missing things. I'm missing things. So I need to now make up for that, and I need to put more time into my reflecting time on Sunday. So every Sunday I take 1 hour and I go through my week and see what happened this week. Right? What did I learn? Like, if we look at the situation, what did we learn from the situation? We learned that Europe is dependent on Russia. That's a fact, right? The reason why we cannot take the measures that we would like to take is because we're dependent. So where are we dependent of on other things in our lives? I had a situation in my business when I was dependent on one specific team member on my team, and I know we didn't have the best of relationships, and I know maybe there were some things that we could have done better, but I was still, it was a pain for me to find a solution for that situation. So I needed to push. And so what happens now with the crisis, we get this push. But unless we take the time to reflect upon that and then learn, like, if we have dependency on our lives, For example, maybe we need to change the way we use our cars if now fuel price is a problem, right? That's one thing that we could learn.
Yes, I was actually noting down. Sorry for for 1 second of waiting. I actually have 3 points that I would like to. Well, 2 points and one question afterwards. While you were thinking about comparing the leader of Ukraine versus the leader of Russia, and we need to be very objective in this one. So yeah, I was just imagining that the way we are seeing from our side, from our perspective, we see the whole situation in one, let's say we have one version of the situation. But
Mhm.
from experience, we should remember every single person that's listening to us. Remember that there are two sides of the story. For every story, there are two sides. And it depends on which side you're hearing the story from. So we are hearing from, let's say, from Ukraine, but imagine that you are on the other side. What would the story be in this case? What would you hear? What would you think? What would you feel? How would you act actually upon the situation if you would have been on the other side? Because I think that is a very important step in. I think it's in Art of War. I don't remember exactly, but it studied the enemy. Try to well, you're the enemy from your side of the story, right? Because
Mhm.
on the other side, the enemy would be on this side of the story. So study your enemy. Try to understand how they act, how they think, and if you really understand your enemy, then you would be able to act upon it in a very good way. And in a previous meeting, we discussed about decisions. How can we do the right decision when we don't know exactly what will be in the future with the current context? And for any leader, they don't know in a time of crisis how the context would be from now on. I have another point. You said you talked about reflect upon your day at the end of the day. If you this is another important step also from a leadership point of view. You need to evaluate your experience to learn from it. But if we ask 100 people how many people they meditate, let's say reflect upon the day at the end of the during the at the end of the day, how many people do you think they would say yes, I reflect upon my day? From 100 people, how many
So
people do you think they will?
if we just stop people on the street,
Yeah.
well, maybe two.
Maybe two.
Uh, maybe
It
two.
might be.
Well, maybe I'm pessimistic. Maybe maybe more than that. But I think you made a really good point there when you said there is always two sides of the story. And how does this apply to leadership, right? There is always two sides of the situation. And imagine, instead of, now how can we apply this to our team, right? Imagine being a team member on your team during these times, right? What would you see
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you would
Yeah.
be, rather than being the leader of the team, if you would be a team member, right? Well, what will be the message that your team will get in this period, and what would be the message that you would send to the team if you maybe kind of leave your position and go do something that it will help but might not be your responsibility. And I see two reactions to this. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I see leaders of businesses that go hands on and do something about the situation. And that means that they're not in their usual, workplace, if you like. They don't lead their team. And I see leaders say, hey, I'm so much involved in this, I cannot leave my position, but I have the finances to finance if someone is willing to do the work, right? So, two different approaches to the same situation. And I believe from my experience that the second one, where we as a leader, we still keep, this is prioritization, right? How can I still keep sight and keep in my sight my priorities and yet be able to help? And that's how. The role of a leader in times of crisis is to create the best possible outcome from the situation for their organization and for their team. And I don't know about you, but I can help my team better from doing what I'm good at rather than go do something else which maybe I'm not best at, and is not really serving my team the best way. Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I I came up with an idea. Now it got into my mind, and I really am interested in strategic video games, not not strategic war games or something. But I was every single time I was so curious. Why is the leader, as the manager or the emperor of the or the king, why are they sitting on the back of the battlefield? And I have one because, and I need to explain a little bit of the context here, because while I was playing one game, one
Mm-hmm.
strategic video game, I was in conflict with Napoleon on the map. So I
Mm-hmm.
was against Napoleon.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to, because I knew the history, and say, okay, this is the leader. I need to get rid of him the best I can, the fastest I can. And I actually attacked the army of Napoleon, and I actually created a strategy to try to kill Napoleon directly. I didn't care about anybody else from the army. I just sent my troops to try to kill, not assassinate, but kill Napoleon. I couldn't do that because somehow he escaped. Somehow he really escaped, and I said, what? I cannot do that, because once if I killed that, I killed him in the game was over.
Yeah,
And somehow I
absolutely.
couldn't do that. But I'm curious, in the battlefield, if I'm on one side of the army, yeah, of the conflict, and I don't get me wrong, I don't, please, I really need to make this statement. Don't associate this example with me, with Napoleon, with the current situation between the yeah, presidents of Ukraine and Russia. It's not the same thing. It's just one example. I really need to make this very clear. So in my head while playing the game, I said, why in wars in general, why don't they just go and kill that one and not to lose blood between the armies? And then I realized that the general is sitting in the back because, you know why?
Well,
He is very important if he is killed in the battlefield, because if he's in the front row, the army would vanish because they wouldn't be organized anymore. So that's why the leader sits in the back, because you need to understand the importance of your own role in this situation. You, as a leader, if, let's say, metaphorically, if you die in this situation, it will be a bigger, let's say, a more huge damage to everything. So that's
absolutely.
why you should be very clear, and you should be sure that you keep yourself alive, because so many people depend on you. If you lose, let's say, one soldier, let's say it's okay. It's not good because you lose one soldier, but it's okay. But if you lose the general, the head of everything, then it's over.
You're making
So
such a great point. I'm with you there. Absolutely. And we see this with Ukraine president, right? We see Zelensky
yes,
being out, right? But
yes,
if you have noticed, he has changed the strategy. So the strategy in the beginning was he was out in the front lines, and people say, well, no one wants a dead president. Is not going to help us. So instead of him kind of just going live or recording videos, just outside and maybe in front of statues or maybe buildings that people could recognize and they know where the leader is, he changed that strategy and he started then recording or streaming from inside rooms which were not decorated, maybe just with a flag. So you're absolutely right.
yes,
As a leader, we need to take care of the company and allow our team to actually take care of the problem of the crisis. But if as a leader we just go out there and in situations like this we might get hurt or even killed, then as you say, our company might be disorganized afterwards. So again, this is very important for the leader to understand their roles, and know what are their priorities in this period, right?
Yes, and it's so true. Especially if I can relate again to video games, the leader has a guard, a personal guard. So that is very important. Do you, as a leader, do you have your personal guard? If you really want to be in the front line of the war or of the conflict, yeah, of the crisis, do you have a guard protecting you, or are you just, let's say, crazy enough and beach out there in front of, let's say, all the danger that can be? So it's very important if you really want to be in the front line. You need to have a protection guard. And I think the solution, the strategy that the president of Ukraine used, it's a good one in my perspective, in my experience with playing games, because that way. I also heard that he had three tentatives of assassination. So you can think about that. If somebody wants you
Absolutely.
out of the picture, then means that you might do you're might shaking things, yeah. So yeah, trying to shake things, and somebody doesn't like it. So you need to understand also from this perspective. Okay, you want to be out there, you want to be in front of well, near the people in the, yeah, basic line, the first line, but you need to understand your importance and your role in this, because if you're not there anymore, you're making more damage than if you would be a little bit in the background to keep you safe, to continue to work with this and to get your team, get your company to the target. So we really need to remember that. How can you create the protection guard, and how can you sit one step behind the front lines to be sure that you're still with the people, but a little bit protected for you to continue your job?
Absolutely. And I think this also takes us to the last point that we wanted to touch today, which was, I know, there's a balance between what we see President Zelensky doing, and the hope that he gives to people, and putting ourselves in a dangerous situation. And I know people have asked, Florin, what can we do more now about hope? We talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit, that leaders are, you know let's call it Napoleon Bonaparte, which you were fighting with in your video game. He said that leaders are dealers in hope, right? And I truly believe that,
Yes.
because this is what Zelensky actually does. He is a dealer in hope, right? He shows the way. He gives hope to people. And there is two, what the crisis does. The crisis is a great exaggerator. Like in times of crisis, if you're going downhill, a crisis will just accelerate this. If we look at the prices of the gas prices and the fuel prices right now, if your company had a small margin, and you're, for example, a transportation company, a delivery company, now you have to invest even more into your deliveries, then you're going to go down faster, right? So the crisis is an exaggerator. And the reason why it's an exaggerator is because things move faster, and also because a crisis hits in people's morale, right? And when we look at the two armies, we look and we see a high morale Ukrainian army, and this is also the law of Big Mo, as John Maxwell will call it, the law of momentum, which is the leader's best friend. And as soon as we have a victory, that will actually raise morale in the team, and we can actually build on that momentum. And this is what we see with Ukraine. They have momentum, and they can withstand massive attacks just because they believe and they have high morale. But if we look at the Russian army with low morale, even though they have a lot of equipment, they're not performing as it was expected, just because morale, it's an exaggerated. So when your team has high morale, they play above their skills, they play above their game. But when they have a low morale, that's when they play below their skills. So as a leader, we have to understand what's our role, why it's important for us to give hope to our people, because that will increase morale, and what will happen is that we'll be able, to move on and to go to the crisis and navigate this crisis better than with low morale.
I actually this gets me to the next question, but because we have already 30 minutes of this episode, I would actually leave it for next time. My question would be for people to hear it before and continue to listen to the next episode. How can you how can you create hope in your team?
That's a
Because okay,
wonderful
the
question.
leader is the one who generates hope when people are feeling down, and because of these great things will happen. Actually, they will act more than they think they are capable of, and they are actually the strength is actually it's increased because of this, and the other way around. If you're losing hope, if you I don't know, if you fall a little bit, it's done for you. So for the next episode, let's discuss a little bit how to create hope in your team, especially because
Absolutely.
this is very important in difficult times to inspire this hope. And how can a leader create hope? And I would add something else to think about. Let's say, for example, the leader, because they need to see the reality as it is, not good, not bad, but this is the situation. Let's say we are in a hole on the ground, so we need to get out of it.
Hmm.
If the leader is not very sure, let's say he sees the situation is bad, how can they as a leader, how can they still deliver or create hope in their company when they don't believe that things will get better from that situation? So I think it's a good it's a good
Absolutely, and
context
it's
to
probably
discuss.
always the time. Sorry, it's probably always the case because, well, that's why we need leaders. That's why
Yeah.
leaders are paid for, right? To be able to see the situation differently and inspire people to move on and actually progress despite all the circumstances. So I look forward to this episode. So just to recap, next week on Wednesday at 5 p.m. we're gonna have a guest that I'm gonna interview. We're gonna resume those guest interviews. But on Monday at noon on our Leading on Monday show, I'm gonna be back with Madalina. We're going to look at what leaders can do. How can they be a catalyst in times like this? And what attitudes, leaders should have in situations like that. And absolutely, we're going to look at what the team could do to create hope and what the leaders should do to give hope to their team, despite maybe he or she might not believing in that.
Mhm.
Sounds good?
If they can do that, if they don't believe in that, if they can inspire other people in hope, that's a good question, and I'm looking forward to have our next conversation.
Absolutely. Me too. Have a great one. And I look forward to see you next week. Take care. Thank you everyone
You
for
too.
tuning in. Take care.
Bye,
Bye bye.
everyone.
Bye.